Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Raymond Yeung.
And I'm Joyce Woo. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
China's Commerce Minister promises flexibility in individual visa scheme to address overcrowding concerns in Hong Kong.
Government receives more than 100,000 submissions as public consultation on political reform ends.
And leading pan-democrat confident all opposition lawmakers will veto reform package and warns of chaos ahead. China's Commerce Minister has promised Beijing will optimize and adjust the individual visa scheme for mainlanders when needed to address the concerns about the flood of visitors into Hong Kong.
Gao Hu-chung said Beijing is very concerned about growing hostility against mainlanders, but reminded everyone that the borders were opened up at Hong Kong's request. ATV's Arthur Killer reports.
On the sidelines of the parliamentary session in Beijing today, Commerce Minister Gao Hu-chung addressed concerns on both sides of the border about the flood of mainland visitors into Hong Kong and the growing resentment in the SAR. Gao reminded everyone that the individual visit scheme for travelers from 49 mainland cities and multiple entry visas for Shenzhen residents were granted by the central government at Hong Kong's request. Gao said the arrangement had played an indispensable role in promoting Hong Kong's economic growth, local employment, and people-to-people exchanges, bringing immediate benefits to the city. But he admitted new problems had developed as the number of travelers increased. Those problems have been highlighted by rowdy and violent protests against mainland visitors recently in border districts, where local residents are complaining of overcrowding, inflation, and inconvenience. While parallel traders have been held primarily responsible, protesters have been targeting anyone from across the border wheeling a suitcase. Gao said the central government was very concerned and was in close contact with the SAR government over this. Any city will have a limit for receiving tourists in terms of services, hospitality capability, and infrastructure, he said. This is determined by the city's commitment to the input of hospitality capability. The Commerce Minister went on to promise that Beijing would continue to optimize and adjust the individual visit scheme if needed. But he still believes it will not affect people-to-people exchanges and economic cooperation between Hong Kong and the mainland. Chief Executive Leung and local delegates said they would raise the issue when they met with Beijing leaders. Arthur Killer, ATV News.
The government has received more than 100,000 submissions at the end of the second round of public consultation on political reform.
The chief executive and his ministers are now putting together their final package of proposals, and they've already shot down some key suggestions by the pro-democracy camp. ATV's Winner Wong reports.
Chief Executive Leung was greeted by student protesters demanding genuine universal suffrage as he arrived at a youth forum in Chai Wan this afternoon. Inside, Leung was asked whether he truly understands the people's aspirations for real universal suffrage, which prompted him to compare Hong Kong with London, New York, and Tokyo. The Hong Kong government enjoys even greater autonomy than the mayoral systems of these cities, Leung said. This privilege is given to us by the central government, so they absolutely have the right to be involved in our political reform. He reminded the audience that it is ultimately Beijing that appoints the chief executive. We are totally different from other cities, and therefore it is unrealistic for us to strive for so-called international standards in our elections, he added. And we cannot switch to the method of civil nomination as requested by youngsters during the Occupy movement. With the second round of public consultation on political reform ending today, top officials in charge were out and about promoting Beijing's controversial framework for the 2017 chief executive election. After a meeting with members of the Federation of Education Workers, Chief Secretary Carrie Lam revealed that up until yesterday, the government had received over 100,000 proposals. This included suggestions by the Liberal Party for registered voters to have a say in naming chief executive candidates, which Lam rejected. The chief secretary defended yesterday's tough talk by Zhang Dejiang, the head of China's parliament, who warned there may not be a second chance for universal suffrage if Hong Kong does not seize this opportunity. Lam said while people believe there will be no universal suffrage until 2022, if the government's final proposals for the 2017 election are vetoed by the pan-democrats, there may be no reform even beyond that. Looking at all the pro-democracy demands, Constitutional Affairs Minister Raymond Yeung pointed out how it's difficult to please everyone. Tam himself rejected another proposal by former Chief Secretary Anson Chan's group for backup candidates in the chief executive race. We cannot waver from our policies just to secure a few pan-democratic votes, Lam stressed. As for student leader Yvonne Leung seeking a judicial review of the second phase of public consultation, Justice Minister Raymond Yeung said he would respect what the High Court has to say about it. Winna Wong, ATV News.
Leading pan-Democrat Alan Leung is confident that no one in his camp will break their promise to veto the government's final package of political reform proposals.
Leung also predicted gloom and doom immediately after the veto, as Beijing loyalists ruled out any compromise on the central government's part.
Hong Kong's only delegate to the National People's Congress Standing Committee made it clear in Beijing today that it's impossible for Hong Kong to pursue universal suffrage outside the framework set by China's top parliamentary body. The central government has time and again expressed that the decision is final, Richard Fan said. For those pan-democrat lawmakers who are hoping for 11th-hour changes like last time, I can assure you that it's not going to happen. Fan was referring to the last political reform exercise in 2010, during which the Democratic Party made a last-minute deal with the government. Henry Tang, the losing candidate in the 2012 chief executive race, also urged pan-democrats to pocket what's on the table.
I hope the pan-democrats will come to their senses and participate actively.
But that seems highly unlikely, with the government running out of time to persuade a few moderate pan-democrats not to join their colleagues in vetoing the final package of political reform proposals to be put before them this summer. Leading pan-democrat Alan Leung of the Civic Party told ATV's Newsline that he's confident no one among the 27 opposition lawmakers will do a last-minute U-turn.
I sense that there is nothing that would make me anxious or worry that probably all 27 would vote against any proposal to be made by the Hong Kong SAR government that is restrained by the NPCSC decision of the 31st of August.
Leung predicts that when the package is vetoed, political reform will not come to a standstill as the government has warned. Instead, he is expecting chaos and crisis first, followed by a revival of universal suffrage. He compares it with the story of the mythical phoenix.
Hong Kong would become totally ungovernable. Government cannot effectively govern or push through any public policies that are badly needed. So Hong Kong may have to be burned down to ashes. And hopefully, after that, we would rise as the phoenix does.
You can watch the full Newsline interview here on ATV World Sunday night at 8.
China's Commerce Minister has expressed confidence in meeting a 6.1% growth target for foreign trade this year.
And the country's Environment Minister has promised to push ahead with tackling pollution, but warned against expecting too much too soon. Here's Arthur Ericula.
With China missing its goal of 7% growth in foreign trade last year, this year's target has been lowered to around 6%. Commerce Minister Gao Hu-cheng blamed the drastic slump in the prices of imported goods. But he's confident of 6.1% growth in 2015, as Beijing expects overall domestic and foreign situations to remain largely unchanged, and a modest increase in international demand. He said the central government would step up the implementation of the policies already introduced to support steady growth, as well as greater support for restructuring enterprises to increase the added value of export products and their competitiveness. Gao also said Beijing took a serious stance in dealing with the U.S. legal challenge against China's subsidized exports. In the challenge filed last month with the World Trade Organization, Washington claims Chinese export companies received more than $1 billion in several industries over 3 years, giving them an unfair advantage. Gao insisted that China consistently respected WTO rules and found the challenge regrettable. But he said Beijing would fulfill its obligations according to the World Trade Body's arbitration mechanism and appropriately handle the case. Another key issue discussed in Beijing today was the environmental cost of rapid development. With 80% of 300 mainland cities failing to meet air quality standards last year, the central government has vowed to intensify efforts to tackle air pollution. But Environment Minister Chen Jining said the country was facing an unprecedented conflict between environmental protection and development. He noted that environmental laws were still not as strong as economic laws, and innovation was also weak. But Chen guaranteed the public will be able to play a greater role in monitoring the situation, as greater transparency will prevent those who break the rules from escaping punishment under the Environmental Protection Law. The Environment Minister also pledged to prevent polluting factories from relocating to coastal and western regions, addressing concerns that low-end manufacturers and plants would shift to these areas which are economically lagging behind the East. Arthur Ricchiola, ATV News.
Malaysia remains tight-lipped about an investigation report on flight MH370 due to be released tomorrow, exactly a year after the passenger plane disappeared with 239 people on board.
But the country's transport minister is hopeful the wreckage of the plane will be found by May, or it will be back to the drawing board for the international search effort. On the eve of the one-year anniversary of the disappearance of flight MH370, Malaysia's transport minister expressed confidence that search teams will find the wreckage of the missing aircraft in the southern Indian Ocean, hopefully by May. If not, the three countries leading the effort will have to rethink the way forward.
Yeah, by end of May, if we still cannot find the plane, then we have to go back to the drawing board.
But Malaysia is not giving up one of the costliest and longest searches in the history of aviation.
I think monetary-wise, we are prepared to support the search. Malaysia, in fact, we have supported the search for the past 1 year, so we'll continue to support the search.
Australia, Malaysia and China are due to meet next month to discuss future strategy. The transport minister refused to comment on an interim investigation due to be released tomorrow. So far, the Malaysian government has only said it's investigating whether the plane's disappearance was deliberate. It has also declared the airliner lost with 239 people on board to allow compensation claims, upsetting their families who want a full account and closure. The Singapore-bound flight dropped off the radar shortly after takeoff from Kuala Lumpur on the 8th of March last year, vanishing without a trace to become one of aviation's tragic mysteries.
More international news. Dozens of Chinese citizens were released today after being wrongly detained at Moscow airport for drug trafficking.
And Iraqi government forces claim to be making progress in recapturing territory seized by Islamic State militants. Footage released by Iraq's Ministry of Defense claims to show government forces targeting Islamic State positions in Anbar and Salahuddin provinces to recapture the city of Tikrit. In the largest offensive yet against the extremists who seized the north of the country last year, Iraqi government forces and Iran-backed militia stormed a town on the southern outskirts of Tikrit, Saddam Hussein's home city. The operation had been slowed by bombs planted along the way and also snipers. Islamic State extremists have encircled Anbar's largest airbase and surrounding towns since last year. 34 Chinese citizens have been released after being wrongly detained at a Moscow airport for bringing in food material which was mistaken for drugs by Russian customs. Earlier, Russian media reports claimed that the group had been detained at the Sheremetyevo International Airport for bringing in 230 kilos of methamphetamine. Customs later tested and analyzed the suspected drug and found it was actually bitin, a kind of material used to make tofu. All of those involved in the mix-up were employees sent to Russia by a Chinese company in northeast China's Heilongjiang province. A historic moment for space exploration. NASA spacecraft Dawn has completed a 7.5-year journey to an unexplored dwarf planet called Ceres. It became the first spacecraft to orbit the miniature planet, which sits on the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ceres is a mystery that scientists have yet to solve. Last month, as dawn approached the planet, it relayed images of large spots on the surface, which scientists suspect are patches of ice exposed after an asteroid impact. They believe Ceres may have had an underground ocean early in its history that froze later on. The mission cost NASA around $473 million. Time now for sports with Bo Leung.
So the Davis Cup is underway, Bo.
That's right, and Britain won back-to-back matches. Britain is on course to record their second straight victory against the US in the Davis Cup. But first, a pair of rally drivers have crashed their car into a reservoir during the Mexico rally.